Hello everybody, my name is Jonas Wenhoff. In this tutorial I'm going to show you some of the basic principles of dodge and burn. In this tutorial we are going to go from this starting image here to this image. Or let me rather say we are going to go to this image just using dodge and burn as well as some corrections that I did before that I'm not going to show here. And with a little more fine-tuning, we are going to go to this level here. Again, not in this video. This video is all about dodge and burn. So let's get started. I'm going to disable my layer group of finish now. And let me first say that I did some corrections in advance so that we don't have to do these anymore and can concentrate completely on the dodge and burn process. First of all, let me say that there are two basic approaches to dodge and burn. First is Microlevel dodge and burn. That means you zoom into at least 100% and you dodge and burn every single pore of the image. That's of course very time consuming, and in my opinion a tablet is really useful to do this. And the second approach is to do Macrolevel dodge and burn. That is, you zoom out far more, use far bigger brushes, and you sculpt the body, strictly speaking. So let me begin here with the Microlevel dodge and burn. I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to call it dodge and burn. Use the mode of soft light and fill it with the soft light neutral color 50% gray. I use the soft light layer rather than the curves adjustment layers. I can show you. Another option is to use darken. Oops. And lighten curves adjustment, just paint on the masks, but I rather use the soft light layer because I found it easier to just switch my foreground and background color using the X key. Okay, now we're going to set up our brush. First of all, I'm going to lower my opacity as well as my flow. This gives me some advantages because this way I can build up my strokes, work more carefully and more precisely. Next, I'm also going to change my background and foreground colors because I found that most of the time when you work with white or black alone, you introduce some discoloration. That means you either desaturate the areas or you saturate them too much. And to avoid this, I'm just going to use my color picker and choose a very light color from the skin, make it even lighter and desaturate it some more, about something like this. Now for my background color I'm going to do the same. Pick a deep shadow color, desaturate and darken it. Okay, now we can begin. I'm going to zoom in to 100% now, and with my foreground color I can lighten certain areas, whereas with my background color I can darken areas. The important thing is that now that we are zoomed in to 100%, we are not going to work on any bigger shadows, because we can't see the full picture. And so, for example, if I might say that, okay, this area here is too light compared to these areas here around, and then I zoom out and I see that, oh, this area built the cheek, and so if I had erased it, it would have looked very odd. So that's the reason why, if we are zoomed in, we're just going to do zoomed in work. The brush controls are really useful for this, because I'm going to resize my brush all the time, holding down my Alt or Option key and the right mouse button, and I'm just going to move my mouse to the left or to the right to make my brush bigger or smaller. Another thing is that most of the time when you're doing dodge and burn, you won't see the results immediately, especially not if you're a beginner. But that should not be a reason to do it faster. Because if you do it too fast, you'll probably end up having something that looks really bad. And so you should rather take a little longer, but do a more careful job. So as you can see, areas that are lightened are, for example, let's say here, this area. You see that there's a little dark spot here. I'm just going to lighten it so it blends better with the surrounding areas. This area here as well. Resize my brush again. Don't worry, this is very time consuming, but with the time you'll get a lot faster with it, because you'll gain practice, you'll learn how to do it, you'll make less mistakes, and so after a while it'll work pretty fluidly. If you notice that my adjustments are really just strong, I'm just going to lower my opacity a little. For example, I press the 1 key to shift my opacity to 10%, press Shift 1 to get my flow to 10% as well. Now I can do a more precise job. That way it will of course take me longer to do this, but the results will be better because I have more control over how much lightening or darkening I want the areas to get. Another thing is that you probably don't want to work on one area alone and dodge and burn it to perfection, then move on to the next area, because that way you'll probably end up with awkward looking skin, because it's very unlikely that you'll do an as perfect job with the rest of the skin as you did with the first part. And so you should rather move through your image, remove everything that is distracting to you, and so get a more uniform result. If you have difficulties seeing which areas need lightening, which need darkening, there's also a very nice trick to do that. I'm going to show you. This is just create a hue and saturation adjustment layer, call it desaturate, put its mode to color, and just pull the saturation to -100. Next I'm going to add a curves adjustment layer, call this one darken, and just lower the midpoint a little. And that way you can see that the contrast has gone up, and so it's more easy for us to see which areas differ from the surrounding areas. Of course, if you get into areas that are really dark, you should probably disable the darken layer and see if you have to do any corrections here. For example, this little spot here needs to be lightened, this area here, etc. So, dodge and burn, it's all about being really patient with your images. There's no special key, there's no magic trick to it, it's just, yeah, being patient. So, for example, I need to do a little on the nose, because that area really disturbed me. And so I'm just going to tame it down. Do some corrections here. Yep, looks good. Okay, let's call it quit at that place, because as you can imagine, dodge and burn really takes hours, and sometimes you're like 5 to 6 hours just dodging and burning the skin, and so I don't think that YouTube will let me upload files that big or that long. And of course I'm not really I've done all this before, so I don't really think that it's worth doing this again. Okay, so now we're going to the next part. I'm just going to turn a quick preview. Okay, disable the visibility, and you can see that we really did a nice job so far. In very short time, we managed to get some of the spots out of the skin, and the skin looks much cleaner and much fresher now. So the next thing I told you about is the Macrolevel dodge and burn. For this we're going to use bigger brushes, as I said, and I would suggest that we use another dodge and burn layer as well. I'm going to call that one sculpting. Same here, fill with soft light, neutral color, 50% gray. And on this layer we are just going to do broader adjustments, for example enhance and transitions between lights and shadows. For example, I'm going to lighten shadow here a little, darken it here, lighten a little, lighten here to make the cheekbones stand out more. Darken here, get a little softer transitions. Okay. Lighten on the skin, lighten on the chin. To get the chin looking a little more forward, because as you might know, I'll just give you a quick example. I'm going to create a new layer, call that one box. And now you probably already know this, but light areas stand out more to the viewer. They seem to get a little forward, whereas black or dark areas seem to be a little more distant. So we can try to use this to sculpt the face of our model, or the whole body of our model. And for example, we could darken right here and lighten this area here, so that her cheekbone really looks like it's really standing out. Or we could just darken her eyebrows a little to make her eyes stand out a little more. We could accentuate the shape of her shoulder. For example, I could lighten here. Lighten, lighten, lighten. Darken this area here. Now I see, okay, this area here looks really... I'll just have to do a little more pixel level dodge and burn. I'm sorry. This really needs to be fixed. Once again, I switch back to my dodge and burn layer, the original one. I'm just going to lighten areas with my more or less white brush and darken others with my black brush. I'm constantly going on my X key to switch my keys, and that way I can easily remove this area here. I'm not going to do a perfect job here, just tone it down a little. And that's also the beauty of dodge and burn, because you can decide how far you want to get with it, or how far you want to go with it. That means that sometimes you just need to tell yourself, okay, I'm done with this, and then you really are done with this, because you could effectively spend all night dodging and burning areas, and you would still find areas that are not looking perfect. So at one point in time, you just have to say, okay, it's enough. That's good enough for me. Maybe it's after 20 minutes, maybe after 5 hours, maybe after 2 nights. It all depends on the quality that you want to get out of it and your level of experience. So that's much better. But in this area there's another problem, and I don't know if you can see it. I'll just put another layer on top of it, a new adjustment layer called Saturate. And I'm just going to bump up the saturation a little, because in this area you can see that it's pretty red. And this can sometimes happen when you dodge and burn as well. And dodge and burn is, in my opinion, not the way to go to deal with this odd color. There's another way. You just add a new layer, call it color, set the mode to color, and remove our saturate layer again. Just use the Alt key in the brush to pick up a nice skin tone and simply paint over the areas that don't look so nice or that look too red. You might as well use curves for this, or hue and saturation adjustment layers, selective color, whatever you want to. The main thing, or the really important thing, is that you don't try to dodge and burn it, because it would work, of course. You can do literally everything with dodge and burn, but it just wouldn't look any good, so it's really not worth the effort. So let's see, that's what we started with, and in the short time that we did this, we ended with this image here. I would say that's a pretty good enhancement. You just have how does the real thing look, and of course I already showed you I did the dodge and burn before, and so I'm just going to disable all my layers before and going to alt click on my dodge and burn layer. And as you can see on this layer, I merged my dodge and burn layers so they have both the shape enhancement as well as the pixel level dodge and burn. And you can see that sometimes I really use very little strokes to paint on my skin. Sometimes I use broader strokes. So what's important is that you set your brush size accordingly to the area that you want to work with.